Hello folks, Sinow here, your new home for everything Resident Evil Resistance, and today I am bringing you 5 quick tips to counter Nicholai, the newest Mastermind added to the game, who is giving a lot of the Resident Evil Resistance player base some real hassle. I do empathize with a lot of people out there. I myself have been struggling to win against Nicholai when I'm in an uncoordinated team. It is very difficult to win against him as a solo survivor if your teammates decide to run off and get gunned down horribly by cameras, and yes, I know that can be frustrating. However, there are 5 tips I think I can give you to generally improve everyone's chances against Nicholai, counter some of his gun-based gameplay, and things that I've found just generally help my chances out there. So, tip number 1 I'll give you is consider bringing health boosting equipment. One thing that Nicholai can do is dish out a lot of damage to survivors very quickly. With his tracking ability, which he can apply very easily, survivors take an extra 20% damage, and he already can do bonkers damage with his guns. So one thing I would recommend is that you bring health boosting equipment such as the bulletproof vest, for instance. This allows you to take a little bit more gun damage, for instance, when you're opening doors or things like that, without getting downed. When you start to get downed, it becomes a lot easier for Nicholai to sort of like pick on you, and it becomes increasingly difficult to get back up and recover your time. So health boosting equipment will allow you to get from point A to point B without like losing a lot of time and momentum, and you should probably consider taking bulletproof vest 3 minimum on each survivor. I find that really helps your chances. Other equipment you might want to consider taking is movement speed is not such a bad idea with the army boots here. It really helps you avoid gunfire. Also, supplements are really nice. So what supplements do is they make the effects of yellow herbs stronger, so that's an attack and defense boost. This works really well in particular if you munch a yellow herb, if you have to go somewhere by yourself and you're thinking that Nicholai might try and gun you down, or when Nemesis shows up. Eating a yellow herb with supplements attached will really help you survive those rocket launcher hits. Another maybe like quite good choice for equipment that I maybe need to test out myself more is emergency rations. So emergency rations means that you kind of get most of your health back when somebody revives you. Usually I try and stray away from equipment that's based around the idea of you having to kind of lose to get things back, but in the current meta it's really easy to get accidentally downed by Nicholai, sometimes without really having a lot of control. For instance, when you open a door, get like immobilizing shotted, and then he just kind of guns you down, particularly as a weaker character. And I find emergency rations can help you recover in these situations sometimes, so consider taking this, perhaps. But in general, you'll definitely want the bulletproof vests, as this will give you more maximum health and make your green herbs also heal you for more, because they scale off of your maximum health as a percentage, and this will greatly improve your chances of survival. Tip number 2 is I would really recommend you consider having Tyrone and January in your team, so you can kind of coordinate this even with randos, because when somebody picks a character you can see it on the kind of white background screen. So if you notice that you don't have a Tyrone or a January, I would really consider trying to fill with one of these picks. The reason why these two are so good: Tyrone is brilliant against Nicholai. His rally fever skill with the passive safeguard basically can immunize your team from not only gunfire, but when Nemesis shows up, be like a huge reduction to how much damage you take, particularly from his rocket launcher. If you can time this just right so that you use it right before Nemesis fires the rocket, you can turn what could potentially be like 2 or 3 down survivors into you taking like negligible damage. So this is brilliant. Tyrone also has his personal skill power kick. You can kick Nemesis over and over with this to try and stun him. If you have HP equipment on Tyrone, you can kind of tank Nemesis for the duration of the ultimate, and if Nicholai isn't smart enough to try and run away from you and chase down another survivor, you can distract Nemesis for as much as possible to make it so that the person with the key card, for instance, in area 2 can get the objective done while Nemesis is too busy trying to fight you. Another reason why Tyrone is really good is that he has the firefighter passive skill First Responder, which allows him to pick up people when they're defeated more easily. This is great because if you combine it with like an EMT license 3 or anything on Tyrone, you can pick up down survivors very quickly, and this will happen if you're fighting against Nicholai. So Tyrone in general is probably the best best pick, I would say, against Nicholai. He's just really good at helping clean up the mess, so to speak, when things get a little bit dicey, and also preventing the mess with his fever skill and also his high HP. Another really good character, like I said, is January. January is great because you will spend a lot of your time wanting to get rid of cameras as quickly as possible, and obviously January's Disruptor Rounds passive High Caliber allows you to do this. You could also use Energy Disruption, but I find that High Caliber is increasingly important because a lot of the damage that certain guns do, like Matilda, to cameras has been slightly reduced, so it takes them a little bit longer to take out cameras. So you'll want something like High Caliber on her, and also maybe EMP rounds too. This will really help. Plus her personal skill, Overload, either with the instant or with the lockdown. For instance, if you're trying to get a terminal done and there's 1 or 2 cameras that Nicholai is using to repeatedly shoot the person who is trying to use the security card key, you can use lockdown to help keep a camera down so that Nicholai is unable to do anything within like a specific area or a specific room. I would definitely recommend having at least a Tyrone or a January on the team. Tip number 3, abuse the dead angles of cameras. So most cameras in this game have 1 of 2 weak spots, which I am calling dead angles. Dead angles are a term which means a kind of angle or position that a defender of like a fortress cannot shoot at attackers from. In this game, dead angles refers to places where you can shoot at a camera where the camera can't shoot back at you, which allows you to take care of a gun or a turret mounted onto a camera without being shot in the process yourself. Most cameras, like I said, have 1 of 2 dead angles. The first dead angle is the really obvious one right under the camera. If a camera doesn't have any debris in front of it, then usually this is a very kind of safe place for you to kind of quickly run under and start shooting it from relative safety, where the Mastermind won't be able to shoot back at you. In certain situations, however, the area directly beneath the camera will be occupied. A lot of the time this is by debris or by railings or something, so the camera will still have enough distance from you to be able to kind of snipe the top of your head. And this is really bad because remember, camera mounted guns do more damage to survivors when they shoot your head. So although cameras tend to get stunned when they're shot at, this can be kind of dangerous. For these situations, there's usually some sort of object that you can hide behind in the room. For instance, if you're opening a door, a lot of the time the door itself or one of the walls, you can peek out just over your right shoulder to be able to shoot at the camera. Because of the way the camera in this game works, for survivors with your third person perspective, this camera here that you can see on the screen, I can shoot this safely like this, but to the Nicholai who's controlling the camera, it will look like I'm completely behind the door and he won't really be able to shoot back at me. So this dead angle is something that you want to abuse as much as possible in order to take out cameras safely and reliably without having to make yourself exposed like this and to try and take down the camera. Tip number 4, stay together and provide cover fire for each other as much as possible. So one issue that a lot of people will find, particularly when you play solo queue, and believe me, this drives me absolutely insane myself, is that as per usual, Jills and Samuels will want to run off by themselves and try and solo all the objectives, and you can do this fairly well against creatures sometimes, but against Nicholai, it's really easy for him to gun down survivors if they're by themselves. And the reason for this is that a lot of the time cameras with guns attached to them get stunned very easily by repeatedly being shot by gunfire from survivors. However, if you're by yourself, there's nothing really there to stun the camera too reliably. If you start to open up fire on a gun, then a lot of the time the Nicholai will have enough kind of space and room to shoot back at you and you'll take lots of damage very quickly. Or if you're trying to ignore the camera, he'll be able to track you and just kind of shoot you down anyway. So for this reason, you want to try and stick together with your team as much as possible. This also allows you to pick each other up if somebody gets downed, or for instance, the Mastermind might have to kind of split fire between you because he can't hit one person if you're body blocking for them. This means that they're less likely to get downed because he's doing a little bit of damage to everyone rather than doing lethal damage to one person, which Nicholai specializes in. I would say there's maybe 1 or 2 exceptions to this. For instance, when Nemesis spawns in Area 2, particularly if you're Tyrone, you might want to try and take the attention from Nemesis and let your teammates run off and do the objectives. This tends to work quite well. Also, sometimes in Area 3 with biocores, you might find yourself in a situation where if you don't think that Nicholai has noticed you, you might be able to slip away and take down a biocore yourself while the others kind of get his attention. But in general, I would say as you move from room to room, try and stick together as much as you can. I would really recommend against running off by yourself, because this is when Nicholai shines most, and this is when he is most likely to down you and then take off tons of time with machine gun fire and with getting people KO'd. And finally, tip number 5. So I'm not going to tell you something really obvious here, like bring a flashbang to stun Nemesis, because I hope by this point a lot of you already know that bringing a flashbang to stun a BOW is generally a good idea. So for tip number 5, I'm going to tell you something that might seem a little paradoxical at first, and that is, if you don't have good cover to hide behind when Nemesis brings out his rocket launcher, consider running towards him, and in particular running behind him. So the reason why you're going to want to do this is that Nemesis can only really turn in like a 90-degree angle from left or right, from where he originally brings out his rocket launcher. And if he wants to turn past this 90-degree angle, he has to do this kind of slow shimmying animation in order to start turning around behind him. And this is kind of like a blind spot that you can abuse as a survivor, as cheap and easy cover. So for a lot of people, when Nemesis first appears and he brings out his rocket launcher, your first instinct is to try and run away from the big scary man with the big scary rocket launcher, and I can see why, because it is pretty terrifying. But a lot of the time you'll actually take a lot less damage if you try and run behind Nemesis, even if he catches you with splash damage by firing the rocket off of a wall and it catches you. There's a lot of drop off from Nemesis players not actually being able to catch you directly with the rocket or blowing up the ground near you. You'll usually find that you can actually survive a rocket hit if it hits off of a wall and you're kind of standing behind Nemesis so that he had to use splash damage against you. However, if you try and run away from Nemesis for the rocket launcher, it's much easier for him to aim it in your general vicinity, and then it does way more damage to you and you get downed, and this is really bad, because then it starts to snowball from there for the Nicholai player and things get very difficult. Do bear in mind that if you try and run away from Nemesis as well, a lot of the time a good Nicholai player will have turrets set up beforehand so that he can chase you into them and you don't really have a safe spot. But a lot of the time running behind Nemesis is somewhere where he won't have a turret set up. And if you're someone like Tyrone, this is also a good place to run behind so that you can kick him in the back, or you can tank the hit. He might punch you a little bit, you run behind him, you kick him again, and generally it just tends to work out better than if you try and run away from him, unless you have like a really good wall to hide behind. So for tip number 5, I suggest you try and run behind Nemesis if things are looking a little dicey. And that wraps up the 5 quick tips in order to counter Nicholai video. I hope this has been really helpful for you. I do think that Nicholai is a little bit overtuned at the moment. I think he can apply tracking to survivors a bit too easily, and that extra 20% damage is really making it difficult for a lot of survivors to take any sort of gunfire, for instance from machine guns, without going down repeatedly. Nicholai's win rate is really high. However, I hope that as a result of getting these tips out to the player base, we can sort of start to fight back against him. He is actually very counterable, Nicholai. I've seen good teams shut down his cameras a lot and render him fairly useless, so you can win against him. I promise you, I've done it myself and I've seen it happen to other people who are playing as Nicholai. You just gotta hang in there, be patient, use the tips that I've said in this video, and try and play smart, and hopefully we can improve our win rates against this new Mastermind. Regardless, thank you so much for watching this video and for all of your support recently. I hope this has been helpful to you, and this has been Sinow signing off. Take care.